Hello friends, my name is Ramasu. Today we shall discuss about topic the project constraint. Friend, today's topic is very interesting, especially if you have interest in project management or you are planning to give exam or PMP in near future. So let's just start. First of all, I would request to please subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell option as well, so that my new videos can reach to you, and also you can follow me on the Facebook page as well. Friend, whenever we talk about project constraint, basically it's a very important topic, especially if you are planning to give exam or PMP in near future, because you will definitely see this topic in the exam. At least 10 to 15 questions will definitely be there in the exam, in which your concepts, your thoughts, your understanding about the constraint will be checked. Secondly, if you are already a project manager and working for implementation of a project, so again you must have to understand the concept of constraint, that how you can manage those constraints for the implementation of a project. So coming towards main topic, project constraints. Friend, whenever we are implementing project, there are multiple constraints are there. Now what is the concept of constraint? Actually, constraint is, just think of that as a limitation of a project. Limitation means that, just think that a person having his hands are binded with a rope. That means you can do something, you can do more than that, but your hands are binded, and so that you are not able to do more things. For example, let me give you an example here. For example, cost is one constraint. Cost means that, for example, the cost of the project is $5,000, so you cannot expend more than $5,000. You know that if you spend more than $5,000, you can achieve more quality of a project, you can achieve more satisfaction of a customer, but you have a limitation. Whenever we are talking about constraint, basically we are talking about limitations of the project. Similarly, another limitation is the resources. Resources means that, for example, you can only use 10 resources for a project, and you cannot use more than 10 resources. So that means, that if you have more resources, you can complete project on time, you can achieve more quality for a customer, more satisfaction for a customer, because you can't use more than 10 resources. So due to that reason, there is a limitation. So basically, project constraints are the general limitation that you need to account for during the project life cycle. There are many constraints are there which you must have to consider when implementing a project. So first is constraint is the scope. What is actually scope? Scope is the boundary of the deliverables. Okay, so that is called as the concept of scope. Whenever we talk about scope, we are talking about the deliverables which we are going to deliver to a customer. For example, if you are implementing an ERP solution and the scope is there, you are giving, for example, 5 modules. For example, supply chain, manufacturing, the finance and accounting, etc. So scope is the limitation of a project. Limitation means that you cannot cross those limits, you cannot go beyond those limits and the deliverables which have been decided. And why? Because see, there is a dependency of the time and money on the scope, because if the scope will increase, the time, money, quality will also be have an impact. So scope is the first constraint. Next is the cost. Cost is another constraint. That means the cost, whenever we are implementing project, there is some budget or cost allocated for the implementation of a project, especially when we are implementing projects in a bank or in any organization. There is a specific budget for the implementation which cannot be crossed. If you are crossing that particular budget, so that means the project is going to be failed. So every project has a budget, and the project should be completed within that budget. If the project is completed within that budget, so that means you are successfully completing your project. If you are crossing that budget, so that means you are failing towards a project. So every project has some financial constraint which must have to be considered when you are implementing a project. Next is the time frame. Time frame means that there is some must have some time duration for the implementation of a project. For example, normally, let me give an example. For example, a project must have to be completed within 6 months. Customer has a requirement. For example, your estimation says that the project should be completed in 7 months, for example. So there is a starting point and ending point. There should be some time duration, which must have to be considered when implementing in a project. And again, the project success is dependent on the time frame. If time frame is increasing, obviously the cost will also increase, the resources will also increase. Okay, so increasing of time will also have an impact on other constraint of a project as well. So time is also a very important constraint of a project. Next is the risk. Risk means that what is actually a risk? Risk is the uncertain condition of a project which may positively or negatively impact your project. Positively means if risks occur positively, that means it will become an opportunity for you. If it occurs negatively, so that means it will become an threat for you. Negative risk will have an impact in terms of cost and schedule, which may destroy or definitely fail your project as well. So risk is also a very important constraint which must have to be considered for the success of a project. Okay, like that means, for example, there is a risk that, for example, you can take a risk of, for example, $1,000. For example, you cannot take more than risk of $1,000. There is a limitation. So think of a risk in terms of limitation. Similarly, there is a risk that your project may delay more than 1 month, for example. So you can take a risk of approximately 1 month of delay, but not more than that. Okay, so relate the limitation with the risk actually. Okay, again, remember the constraint is basically a limitation, so always relate the limitation with the constraint factor. Next is the resources. Resources means like people, equipment, facilities, software, hardware, etc. For example, there is a limitation that for the implementation of a project, you have only 10 resources. You cannot take more than 10 resources. There is a limitation that you will use any particular software for the implementation of a project. There is a limitation that you will buy the material or hardware or equipment from any particular third party vendor. The organization is saying that you have to purchase the material from this third party vendor. For example, there is a limitation that sitting arrangement is, for example, 2 kilometers beyond the project site. So resources means the things which you are utilizing for the implementation of a project, like people, software, equipment, hardware, etc. So always there is a limitation on the utilization of a resources, because resources has a direct link with the cost and with the time frame as well. Because see, if you are utilizing more resources, so obviously you are utilizing more cost as well. For example, if you are using 5 resources, so they have some cost behind it. If you are using 10 resources, obviously the cost of the project will also increase. And again, if the time frame of a project is increasing, okay, so the cost of resources would also be increased as well. So again, there is a limitation on the utilization of a resources as well. Next is the quality. Quality means measure how well your project deliverables meet initial expectations. In simple manner, basically quality means the completion of a project with respect to the scope defined in your project. Okay, so for example, quality says that, for example, if you are implementing e-commerce solution, and the customer says that e-commerce website should be open in all the browsers means that it should be open in Internet Explorer, it should be open in Mozilla Firefox, Chrome, etc. You know that when we have to achieve that particular quality, you have to involve different UI developers, user interface developers, who would be able to optimize the websites with respect to different browsers compatibility, and it requires cost as well. So this is an example of a quality. So quality is basically the completion of the deliverable with respect to the scope defined in your project. Similarly, your customer says that, for example, if you have a banking switch, and your banking switch should process transaction per second for example 1000 transactions should be processed in 1 second. This is the limitation, this is the constraint of a project. That is another type of a quality which you should have to meet. Okay, if you are not meeting that requirement, obviously you are going to be failed, because this is the major requirement of a project. So quality, meeting the quality would also require cost, would also require resources, would also require time as well, because whenever you are going to meet the quality, you have definitely needs to arrange the resources. For example, software developers, the UI developers who will meet that particular requirement, and that particular resources will definitely have some cost. You have to pay them, obviously they will require the money to give you services. So to meet the requirement of the customer, so that you can achieve the quality, you will achieve you need the cost, you need the resources, and you need the time as well. So quality is another very important limitation of a project which you must have to consider when you are implementing a project. Always remember one thing, friend, that meeting the requirement of a customer, that is called as quality, and over meeting the requirement, that means that, for example, customer wants 5 modules and you are giving them 6 modules. So that means that you are basically overreaching the basically the requirements of a customer. That is called as gold plating. That is not the quality. Quality means that whatever the scope defined in the project, you must have to complete it with respect to the requirements defined and as per the definition of scope. That is called as quality. And over meeting the requirements, that is called as gold plating, and as per the PMBOK guide, it is not allowed. It is not a good thing. So last limitation is the quality, which you must have to consider for the implementation of a project. So being a project manager, you should have to know how, you should have a good knowledge about the constraints, and if you have good knowledge about constraint, you can implement and complete the project successfully. So friend, thanks a lot for watching the video. I hope you like this video. If you like it, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and thanks a lot for watching the video. Thank you.